Hello and thank you for joining me for my Module 7 culminating task on functional structures for environmental stewardship. So the two structures that we talked about, or we will talk about, are duck houses and wild garden beds for pollinators. So here's a picture of a type of duck house. There are different kinds. This is one. I made a mock-up of a garden bed out of reclaimed pallets, but we'll get back into that in a few moments as we near that. So in the first lesson, we talked about environmental stewardship and the effects of human activity on wildlife, the loss of habitat, wildflower fields getting bulldozed to build new subdivisions, and landfill waste we so much material goes in the garbage, and a lot of it comes from construction sites and leftovers. So we need to try to minimize waste. So in order to do that, we will be using reclaimed pallets. Now, about reclaimed pallets, you need to make sure you're using the proper one. There are two types. The first is heat treated, and the other is chemically treated. The chemically, you want nothing to do with it. The ones you want to use are heat treated. They'll be marked with HT in black typically, or dark blue. The heat treated, you don't have anything to do with it. Long-term chemical exposure, poison, it'll leach, chemicals will leach into the garden bed. It's not good. So heat treated only. So first what we're going to do is talk about the designs that were then built by students to accommodate a species that they researched. So in the case of the garden bed, I built this to accommodate the needs of pollinators. The one in particular is the wild bermago. So it is a pollinator magnet. So pollinators, as we talked about, are bees, hummingbirds, butterflies. When they go from one flower to the next, they pollinate the flowers. So with the loss of habitat, we can create some habitat in our backyards with the garden bed. So we visit the garden bed as I spoke about earlier. So processing, the next lesson was designing our structures, and then followed by processing the wooden pallets and how to do so safely and to pick and choose what materials we are going to use. So I don't have a wooden pallet here with me, but I have a mock-up of pieces from a wooden pallet. So wooden pallets are typically fastened with nails, 3 or 4 inch nails. They come in different sizes. Some are thin, some are thick. So first off, in processing pallets, you will want to wear gloves for slivers. First off, you're only processing the ones that are heat treated. So after you've identified that, you want to be wearing gloves to avoid splinters and to cut yourself or scratch yourself. So safety precautions, at all times you'll be wearing ear protection, eye protection, which I misplaced. It's here somewhere. Anyways, and some tools that you'll be using: hammer, crowbar, pry bar, and a mallet. Now, before beginning, I found using a wire brush is very handy when scraping off the debris or anything else that's hanging out. Oh, there are my glasses. On the wooden pallet. So I have a small piece. I would recommend doing this on the ground, so that way you could put your one foot on it and safely operate the tool so that the pallet isn't moving around on you. So for example, here's a pallet fastened by nails. What you may have to do is take this end of the pry bar, put in, tap with the hammer gently, under control, to begin prying it gently. Once you've got some purchase with the edge, you get in there, you wiggle it out. You see it raising. You do not want to push down, you don't want to hit the back end this down. You'll be creating a catapult, sending this flying. And as you can see, there are little nails here. We don't want that. So this particular piece is broken, it's too short. It's not something we want to be contending with. So I'll be putting it in the scrap bin right there. So after you separate the pieces, you want to sort them and inspect them. So for example, this piece here has some cracks that travel the length. So it's not very structurally sound, so it's not that usable for what we want to do for any of our structures. This particular piece is very, very thin. It's got a hole, so if you were to use it, you want to cut this off. Okay, this one in particular has a bunch of knots, so it may not look like a problem now, but if you pinch it, you'll feel how thin some sections are, so you definitely want to cut that section off. So ideally, you would have a piece, or what you're looking for is a solid piece, no cracks, no knots. This is something that you can secure, and it'll hold well together. Now, some of them come in different thicknesses, so you'll want to sort them by thickness and by length. So now that we've cut them and got the pieces out of the way, we're going to have to cut them, measure and cut some pieces. So with a framing square and a pencil, what I'm going to do is, whatever my mark is, so I want to cut on that line. Now, in order to safely cut that, we're going to be using a handsaw. Safe precaution, there's a guard in place held by a magnet, which I really like. So this is very sharp. You'll be very mindful. So you will want to secure your wood to a working surface. Now, if I just saw, and when I get near to the edge, it's very likely to just snap off, removing a chunk of the finished wood that I want to use. That's not good. So a few little tricks to make your life a little bit easier. So to avoid that bottom, the piece that remains as you're cutting from snapping off and falling to the ground, leaving with a mess, what you want to do is have a supporting piece. So if you see here where the line is, I've marked, my supporting piece will be set back maybe a 1/4 inch. This is what I like to do, okay? So I'm going to set this down. I'm right-handed, so the saw will be in my right hand, so I want to be, my right hand is over the cutting line. Now, I like to use an improvised fence when I'm using a handsaw. It's a small scrap chunk. Set it here. I'll be setting right on the edge of the line. It'll guide the edge of my saw. So, setting my clamp in place, ratchet that. Now, I have a second clamp on here because I don't want, as I'm sawing, I don't want the back end to pivot and swirl around on me. Like so. They're sturdy. Okay, now with my saw on my line, double checking, there's nothing underneath. Okay, no one's around me with the saw. So the first couple draws, see the saw blade is against my improvised fence. So I'm going to pull, get myself started. A couple times a little notch. Safety first. Oops. Fence moved on me. Okay, so I'm done with this. Put the guard back on, set it out of the way for now. All right. My improvised fence. So this cut's pretty straight. Check my cuts. The square. It's pretty close actually. I'm very happy with that. So I do that with all my pieces. I will sort the pieces by size out of the way. Now, once I have my stack of pieces and I know what my design is, I'm going to need to fasten them together. So to do so, I'll be using a drill. I have 2 drills here. It is a driver drill and I have an impact drill. The impact drill has number 2 Robertson on. The drill bit is 1/8, the same size. The shank of the bit, same size as the shank on the screw, side by side. So I'm using a pilot hole because if I don't, it's hard, it'll split, especially when I'm screwing near the edges. So a pilot bit removes some of the wood so that the threads are what's doing the holding. It's not splitting the wood. So when using a drill, what's often beneficial with my pencil, if I'm doing a butt joint, I'm drawing a quick line sketch. I recommend you do this until you're a bit more comfortable and experienced with the drill. So this line I draw represents here, or where I'm pointing to with the pencil represents where the wood is butting up against. So what I like to do with hearing protection, I can make my 2 pilot holes. I'm just going to poke through, clamped, and second hole. Okay, so now with a partner helping, I'm only drilling through about half the thickness of the screw. Now, to make my lift simpler, I like to start out my screws just so the screw stays in place, so you're not holding the wood. The drill and screws are going to wobble on you, so they're pretty steady. So, you can line up the wood. So, there's no blowout. 2 screws is pretty strong. So this is how I fastened all of my corners. Okay, so now a design consideration I have to think of. My structures be much taller than just this. 2 boards in height, as you can see. Well, what I did inside, I'll show you in a moment, or I'll just show you the actual planter box. On the inside, there are 2 vertical uprights. Now, there are screw tips sticking through. That is a hazard. So what you want to do is, in the corner we see those screws, back those screws out, place a piece of wood, and put that screw back in. This little piece of wood, for example, something like this, will absorb the tips of the screws, eliminating the hazard. Alternatively, you could get in there with a hacksaw, but it's time consuming, it's laborious, and we have scrap pieces, so why not use that option? Once it's been assembled, you'll want to sand it if you need to. What that means is, if you run your hand across, it's very rough, you'll want to take it down. I would use 60 grit sandpaper, maybe 150 if it's really bad. But we're not doing a piece of furniture that's going to be in a house. It is a garden raised or a garden planter for outside. 60 grit in many cases will be adequate. So putting the planter on its side, running the finishing sander here in a ventilated area, gently going over, removing any slivers, rounding some of the corners, and that is all. So after you've built your structure, we then do a stability and strength test. So while resting on a sturdy surface, grab it with 2 hands, kind of see if you can twist it, apply some compression force to see if it shears. Okay? If there's no movement, then it is a reasonably strong structure for a garden planter or a duck house. So as far as finishing besides sanding, we will want to treat it with an oil, something that's environmentally sound, like perhaps a mineral-based or a food-grade mineral-based or mineral oil. The wood will be absorbed really easily. We don't want to use any harsh varnishes because the whole point of this is being environmentally sound, repurposing materials, and what we do use isn't going to harm the environment, or in this case, our pollinators, okay, or duck houses. So the oil will help it last long. We line the inside with a weed barrier to filter, keep the soil in place, and so it will allow for drainage. The bottom, there's some gaps, so any excess water or rainwater will simply soak through. Now, another thing that we will be doing in our check is checking for square. So with in this case, a combination square, checking the corners. Also with a tape measure, you measure diagonally on the outside corners. If your measurement is the same, then you know that your structure is square. Also, does our structure conform or follow our design sketch in dimension, in construction style or type? Did you have to reevaluate how you're putting things together? For example, what I mean is adding the vertical pieces on the inside like this to secure the two layers. At what point did you discover that? Which is fine. There's always revisions to be made as we are going through and building. And one thing I forgot to mention is in the demolition, we would have the supervised use of a sawzall. Thank you very much.